Well, hello there. Hey, hi, how you doing? Good day. Greetings, salutations. I don't know what to say to set the tone on these things, but my attempt is to say, welcome to Hail Yes, the Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. My name is Tony Garcia, Michigan beat writer for The Free. As always, I'm joined by my colleague, Rainer Sabin. He's our Big Ten insider, and this morning he wrote a column about MSU, not super positive, I thought fair, but not glowing. And so I think today that means he's our Michigan guy. But by the end of the week, when he has to write something about Harbaugh, he'll have his green and white glasses on. He'll be an MSU slappy again. But the narratives on the message board aside, what we both are is football guys. And for that, there's no better time of year because, Rainer, we're recording this at 3:22 on a Monday when this hits the inboxes of the masses. It will be Tuesday morning, and we will be 5 days away from the Michigan football opener.
It's exciting, but I'm most excited about finally appearing on MGO blog again for the first time in 2 years.
So what's your standing on MGO? Are you now back in the good graces? Because I'm not.
I don't think I'm in the good graces, I would say, but I'm back on there for the first time in I think a couple years. So. Yeah.
Well, you're making major moves, as they say, but we're gonna the plan for this show. We are excited. We are excited because we've had to talk about. I mean, it's been thoughts about like your column, right, about the MSU stuff and all of what has transpired and what could be and what it looks like. And that's what this Michigan offseason has been. Do they have enough? Or where are they short? Where are they lacking? And finally, those conversations can be done, right? It's about to be football and just the X's and O's, which is why we want to start this show with three thoughts related to the Eastern Carolina game. Michigan plays I said Eastern Carolina. It is East Carolina. Everybody, East Carolina. I have been lambasted in my inbox for referencing them as Eastern Carolina for the East Carolina game. So, just the dynamic. So 3 thoughts about that game. The dynamic of the coaching staff, Jim Harbaugh, we spoke to him and he did sort of elaborate a little bit on how he made his decisions, why he made his decisions for the way he's going to handle the coaching staff during his 3-game suspension and sort of how that will look for East Carolina. Number 2, some specific position groups with play and players to watch because Michigan's favored by 5 touchdowns. So it's hard to take away too much from one game. And then third, a highlight of J.J. McCarthy and really his importance to the team. And Rainer, you really wanted to emphasize that because you think it's being overlooked. Or I don't know about overlooked, but
it's not talked about. It's just not talked about as much. Yeah, right.
Right. And then that'll wrap up the first block. And then in the B block, Stadium in Maine, just a little bit more about what we heard from Jim Harbaugh this morning on a number of things on his suspension, but also the state of college athletics, as he put it, and the status quo that he says needs to change. We'll break that down, what it means, what we agree with, what we do, what we don't, if there is anything. And then finally, we bring in Andrew Burkle, our main man, our producer for the segment 3, and we start making some college football picks, and then people see what our bank accounts look like when we're allowed to bet. Okay, so that's going to be sort of the way we handle it and the game plan moving forward. And it starts with the dynamic of the coaching staff. We now know Kirk Campbell, who was promoted this offseason from an analyst to quarterbacks coach. He will be serving as the offensive coordinator, while Jesse Minter, who is acting as head coach, will still be calling the defenses. Rainer, how do you see that affecting the way Michigan operates?
Well, yeah, again, I think it's really interesting when you think about the fact that Sherrone Moore would have technically been making his debut as the sole OC last year. He shared duties with Matt Weiss before Matt Weiss was let go in the offseason. So this would have been kind of his debut, kind of handling the entire offense by himself. Now you have Kirk Campbell, who people within the Michigan program are very high on and think he could have a really positive influence on the passing game. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Also, when Sherrone Moore gets reintegrated into, the program as far as calling the plays on game day, going forward, how that works coming off, Kirk Campbell's, play calling, debut himself. And so it'll be interesting to see, again, the ramifications, I guess, going forward in the next couple of weeks. As far as, in general, I think, Michigan should be able to handle this pretty well. I think it helps that Jesse Minter, is down on the field calling plays. So he, deals with the players, between series, goes and talks to them, kind of figures out, meets with the other assistants. So he already has that kind of behavior already mapped out. And so same with Sherrone Moore, when he gets his shot at coaching the team in week 3, he's also been down on the field too. So this is not a situation where they're coming down from the box and having to do this and a completely new dynamic for them. It'll be a pretty seamless transition, I think.
Some familiarity in that sense is good, is very good when there's this much movement. But back to the offensive side of the ball for a moment, as far as Kirk Campbell is concerned, do you think it's as simple as passing guy, quarterback coach, passing game coordinator, they're going to try to throw the ball more? Because it's not as easy. To your point, I think you make a great point, because there is no track record for what a Sherrone Moore, quote unquote, offense looks like. We don't know how this compares or would compare to what it would have looked like, right? So I don't know if there's a way to assess other than what the numbers they did last year, 62% running, 38% passing. Compared to that, I guess we won't really be able to see how pass heavy or run heavy it is. But do you see Kirk Campbell wanting to operate in the pass game, or is he going to keep this in the mold of what we know as Michigan football?
I think they're going to want to set the tone with the running game. However, I do think that they're going to try to throw the ball more in these 3 non-conference games than maybe they did last year, because this is the opportunity to kind of expand the dimensions of the passing game that they really didn't take advantage of last year. So, whether that, is Kirk Campbell taking that on himself, or which I don't think it will be the case. I think it's more, again, Sherrone Moore and Jim Harbaugh are going to be there throughout the week. So, they're going to lay out the game plan, and, obviously circumstance dictates a lot of it too. But I would imagine that, passing is going to be more heavily emphasized, especially during this period when they can actually work out some things in the passing game to kind of prepare themselves for the conference slate.
Yeah. And this is a team that can be passed on, right? So I guess we'll just use that as a place to move to sort of the second element of this. And we can continue to talk about the coaching dynamic as part of this. But as for the players, as for the X's and O's of Michigan versus East Carolina, I don't see Blake Corum being slowed, right? Donovan Edwards is going to get his. But I want to talk about, are there a few people individually or units or ideas, themes that Michigan has talked about in this offseason? I have some that I will be watching for how it manifests in this week 1, because I know that Blake Corum is going to run for 100 yards if Michigan wants him to run for 100 yards. If he doesn't, it's because they're not handing it to him that many times, right? So that's not what we're going to learn here. I wonder what you, Rainer, give me. We'll go a little back and forth. Number one, what is that first curious thing that you're looking for?
Well, I just want to see, how much, JJ McCarthy, throws the ball, and, what his chemistry is like with the receivers this year. At times there were issues about that, and he's alluded to it where, he didn't quite understand how fast, certain receivers ran, and trying to get the timing down and such. And that really kind of affected the deep passing game. Some of that was resolved towards the end of the year, but it'll be interesting to see how, far they have grown, or how far they've progressed in that area. For sure. And then, as far as the running game, I'm actually more interested to see how much they use Donovan Edwards as a receiver, maybe, and, maybe have Corum and Edwards on the field at the same time, but Edwards split out wide. They did some of that sometimes, last year where they had Edwards go out wide, and, again, he could be an extra receiver for them. He's certainly shown his ability in that regard. So I think that'll be interesting to see how much they kind of use Edwards as kind of a utility player.
Yeah, his catch against Hawaii that he's talked about, where he hurt his patellas. An example, I think he had a catch. I think it was a 3rd down play against Rutgers, like 3rd and 13, lined up in the slot and converted a nice first down. So Another good point. I'm just curious. I think Michigan might still keep it pretty vanilla, right? Like I don't know how many tricks of the trade they're going to be showing this early on. But another thing on the opposite side of the ball, I mean, how I have not heard this much emphasis on communication, maybe ever, within one specific position group. And I thought it was really striking. I was looking at the numbers. So last year, Michigan had 37 sacks last year. That was tied for 11th nationally. That's not bad, right? Top 10, thereabout in getting after the quarterback. And if you talk to anyone in that unit, on that line, it's like they never created pressure. Like they had no negative plays, no TFLs. And they've been talking about the dynamic between the edge room and the interior line and the communication between them and making sure they're on the same page, right? If like when you're stunting, how far someone's going uphill, or like if you are not keeping contained, how far you go up, like how far you push the pocket, and just all the different ways the pieces work together. I want to see that. I mean, this is this is a very inexperienced East Carolina team. Last year, Michigan would have been catching a team with some decent talent that had some proven pieces. I mean, they lose 2,000-yard receivers, a running back who had 1,700 all-purpose yards and 15 touchdowns, and a 5-year starting quarterback. And I have people in my mentions from ECU talking like, "Why'd you pick Michigan by 50?" Like, I mean, that's kind of how it looks, right? And so there is a lot of unknown. So the point is, this is an offense that is working through a lot of dynamics. Mason Garcia, their new quarterback, is actually, I think, the highest recruited, not just quarterback, maybe player in ECU history. So he's a talented guy. He's 4-star, but it's one of his first. I think it's his first career start. He's thrown 38 passes ever. I mean, and not a lot of proven around him. So Michigan's defense should have the chance to sort of live in the backfield. So how well do they do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I mean, obviously the emphasis is also to get the defensive tackles more involved in the pass rush, and also I think try to get more pass rush on the early downs where it's not as obvious, that the team is passing in that situation. And I think that's been the big emphasis, I think, from their standpoint, is to not be able to just rack up sacks when it was obvious passing situations. Right. And so I think that they're going to be really looking to do that in the early downs and create havoc that way. And so you're getting in those, second and long, third and long situations where it becomes a lot more easier to play defense in that situation than even when they were getting, sacks kind of late in the games, against like Iowa, for instance, when they were just piling up, one sack after the other.
Mike Morris, the defensive player of the year, right? Had like 2 or 2.5 sacks.
Yeah, and Yabioki was, there, and it was a big sack party, and that's those are obvious situations where you're going to be able to pass rush, but being able to kind of do it early in the game, also on early downs, is kind of the key to being a really good pass rush team. And I think they want to get more consistent in that area going forward. As far as ECU, I don't think this is going to be an App State game where, again, like if you go back to that game, I mean, again, the speed caught them off guard. Well, Michigan's got a lot of speed, that's the thing. Like they got speed and power. And so I think, again, they're not going to get, in that kind of position against, or some team from, another part of the country is going to be able to sneak up with them, sneak up on them in some way, shape, or form, because, they've got some kind of hidden advantage. I mean, here, like Michigan's got, power and speed, and they built a quality roster in that regard. So, again, I think that this is, pretty self-explanatory, what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, and even in the part of the Harbaugh era where things were not at this level, right, when they were 10-3, 8-5, but not beating Ohio State, not beating the top dogs, Michigan consistently took care of the business that it was against the teams it was supposed to handle, right? And East Carolina is one of those teams. And I thought it was, we're talking about interior pass rushers, another person we met with today, fifth-year senior Cam Good, former UCF transfer. I thought he had some good thoughts from his time because they were they were foes. He has played East Carolina, and I think the word he used was sneaky, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he
Right.
said, I mean, and other people in Michigan's program have called them giant slayers.
Yeah.
And you got to do that, right? You got to make sure that you're giving. I mean, and East Carolina is not UNLV, right? What we will get to next year, a program with almost quite literally no tradition and
Right.
no winning of any sort. East Carolina is not a good program. It is a proud program that punches up every now and then, but they are cycling down while Michigan's cycling up.
Right, and it's absolutely, and again, it'd be very hard for me to imagine that Michigan, falls into some kind of trap here. I mean, I think they're on notice. Again, Jesse Minter is familiar with East Carolina. As you alluded to, Cam Good has played them. So, I mean, like they've got people that inside Michigan kind of reminding, everyone else of, the possibility. But at the same time, I mean, there's a huge talent disparity between the two programs at this point, where it seems hard, to fathom that, Michigan could, be kind of pushed in this game at any point, really, from first quarter to fourth quarter.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's always the path to the upset, right? I mean, the path here is, I mean, you lose the turnover battle 4-0. I actually couldn't even make something up.
Yeah, I mean, again, and Michigan's not a team that turns the ball over a lot. I mean, they play not to turn the ball over in a lot of ways, which again helps them in to avoid the upset. I mean, again, 2019 they played Army and it was very close, and obviously they went into double overtime, I think, and it was. But again, that was a different style team that plays a different style of football, and like Michigan played into their hands by running the ball a lot. I think Zach Charbonnet had over like 30 carries in that game and such. I mean, here I think Michigan's going to try to throw the ball, and they should be able to throw it pretty successfully against this team. And again, JJ McCarthy is a good weapon that would avoid Michigan falling into that trap. Just based off of his dynamic ability, and same with the other skill players that they have available. Like again, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards are very reliable to get you 5 yards a pop or whatever. So it's that allows you to keep moving the ball and avoid some of those maybe 3 and outs that you had against Army and frustrating sequences. So I think I mean this team is built to handle the weaker teams for sure.
I mean it's built to handle everything, right? Like it's built to beat Ohio State, and it's built to be able to compete with Georgia and Alabama. And when you've done all those things, like handle Ohio State in the trenches, but enough speed outside to still be able to compete elsewhere. Like think about their increased speed on the edge at linebacker, right? Like things they did not have a few years ago.
I think it remains to be seen about Alabama and Georgia. Again, like we still really haven't seen them go toe to toe with that like other physically imposing team with like arguably better talent, and so I'm still, but again, they can play with like a TCU that style because they've got speed on the outside as far as skill position players.
Right. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is it was built with that in mind, right? Like we don't know how it will hold up when they get there, but we know what the direction and what the intention was of its build. And East Carolina, or teams of that level, aren't even on the radar of how Michigan wants to do things. And so I want to get back to our third thing, the name you just mentioned. And in my mind, without question, the single biggest linchpin of this team, it often is in college football, the quarterback. But usually it's because quarterback is the decision maker. He's the leader. He always has the ball in his hand, at least to begin the play. So it's just obvious, right? For Michigan, it seems like more than that. And for me, part of the reason is because of all the depth and pieces elsewhere that might not be there. But Rainer, you wanted to explain why JJ is, I'll use the same word, the linchpin of this team.
Well, and like you said, that the depth there is not nearly as good at other positions. I mean, there would be a huge drop off between JJ McCarthy and whoever's, ends up winning the backup, position between Davis Warren and, Jack Tuttle That it's not even a comparison between the two players. So I mean, him being healthy throughout is critical to Michigan's success. But I mean, as it relates to the college football playoff, should they get there, I mean, he's going to be the difference maker. That's part of what they lacked in 2021 when they went up against Georgia. They didn't really have that quarterback who could really, threaten the defense in that way. And so JJ McCarthy is probably the closest thing that they have to that. And so like, he's really got to take his game to the next level here. And I think, some of these games are crucial in trying to get to that point, maybe developing the passing game so that they're not, caught in a position like they were in TCU where it was kind of a shootout. And, McCarthy threw two picks in that game. And, maybe those picks don't get thrown if, they really worked on the passing game a little bit more during the season. I mean, last year, people were also, arguing like, why aren't you using some of these opportunities like in the preseason or even, preseason, I mean, the non-conference schedule, but, or the, even some of the conference games when they easily were, kind of up ahead, like, why aren't you working on the passing game? And, again, they got to a point in the season, obviously against TCU, where they had to use the passing game. And it worked in a lot of ways, but it also, backfired on them big time with those two pick sixes. And so like, and one of them, it looked like, again, they weren't on the same page. And so does he make those errors if, that is kind of impressed upon him early that like, hey, we need to pass the ball more. And so I think that's important in the next couple of weeks to see where JJ's really grown in that, capacity, whether it's the chemistry with the receivers, choosing when to run the ball and everything else too, and just making decisions.
I think something that is also overlooked in the conversation around JJ McCarthy, his growth arc, is the coaches were learning how to use his skill set too, right? They had not had a quarterback who can do the things JJ McCarthy has done, maybe ever, right? And so they were trying to figure out how to use him best, and much of that was unleashing his legs, right? And there is that give and take. How much do we let him run while knowing he is our key and we must protect him, right? But I think this year the way to get JJ to that next level is you gotta, as the kids say, let him cook. And I think he does that with his legs. I mean, according to PFF, JJ McCarthy had the highest graded. He was the highest graded quarterback on play action passes in the country last year, at 92.9 on a PFF grade, which is an elite grade. And we saw what Michigan was able to start doing against TCU when he started running, and when Michigan does not run a lot of actual RPOs. It's like there is play action, and then there are run options, but run pass option, not a lot of it. I think that is another element and layer that there should be. I would imagine JJ McCarthy would be perfectly capable of handling, that they need to continue to do this. But Rainer, like you just said, I mean, I don't know if we said it on our last pod or if it was off air. You and I have a lot of these conversations, but one thing I know I've said to you, I don't know if it was recorded, is if I'm Michigan, I don't, short of a sack that we can't control, I don't let JJ McCarthy get touched in the non-conference season. You are not allowed to take a hit, like, at all, period. You run, you slide, and that's it. And if he can do that, and if you can give me a handshake that I will not take one single hit that I am not like ready for or like unprepared to take, then that's when you do unleash the offense. I mean, you don't give away all the secrets, but you do have to figure out, is Roman my guy? Is Cornelius my guy? Or is it Tyler Morris, my high school buddy? How much can I use my legs? And I mean, oh yeah, there's Colston Loveland, our All-American tight end. There's a lot of balance to get to figure it out. But I think it starts with JJ extending plays, which he did so well last year.
Yeah, and I think, again, JJ's, you know what you have with Blake Corum, and you know what you have with Donovan, and I mean, you do know generally what you have with JJ, but again, there's also this kind of intrigue about whether he can take that next step and become this kind of elite quarterback at the college level. I mean, and enter, maybe eventually the Heisman conversation. Obviously in Michigan's offense, you're somewhat restricted, I guess, as a quarterback. But, maybe J.J. McCarthy is the guy that kind of, takes that to, removes those, handcuffs, so to speak, and forces Michigan to be able to want to use him because, again, they can get through the Big Ten schedule fine with the formula that they've used the last couple of years. But when it comes, the CFP, I mean, that's obviously been their roadblock. And so they need to prepare for the event that they're going to face, Georgia and Alabama. And that's when, quarterback play is going to be essential. And so J.J. McCarthy has got to get himself ready for that possibility.
Right. And I mean, I wouldn't write them past Penn State or Ohio State, but the point remains. No. Your point remains. Yeah. And this is when it would be awfully nice. I mean, yes. It's a great time that we're able to go on sidelines and in the press boxes and in the press conferences and talk to all the people that we're able to. But one thing we are not able to do is go to practice, right? And actually see how the chemistry looks. And so that's why we are left a little bit open to interpretation. However, Big Ten Network has access that we don't have. And they finished their tour of camps around every single Big Ten team around the conference. And Howard Griffith ranked his quarterbacks per his eye, and he had J.J. McCarthy at the top. So, yes, only 2 quarterbacks in the Big Ten return. So there is a ton of turnover and not a lot of familiar names. But the point remains that he is seen in very good light. And when people in the know had eyes on him, he was still doing well. And so I think there's full reason to have confidence in JJ.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, again, all eyes will be on him as they always are. This year it presents a different situation for him. He's going into week 1 as the unquestioned starter. And so last year he wasn't. Don't forget Cade McNamara started against Colorado State week 1. So, he's the guy and everybody's going to be kind of looking at him going forward.
It's a great point. And not just the guy now. He's been the guy since spring, right? Which has given all that time. So a great point. And on that note, I think we'll put a bow there and take a quick break because when we come back, Jim Harbaugh spoke today. We're going to talk about his media availability and what we heard on Stadium in Maine. Actually, technically, that's on State, but we call it Stadium in Maine. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Hail Yes. Welcome back to Hail Yes. And just a couple hours ago, we heard from not Michigan's only head coach, but both of its main head coach and then its interim head coach, acting head coach, Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter. They both addressed media today. But we're gonna try to keep it to what Jim said because we could talk about that for hours as always. But how he opened is where I want to begin, and I want to open that with that, Rainer. And it was a lengthy speech. It looked like he had many notes written down, thought out about revenue sharing and the future of college athletics and what he thinks is fair and unfair for players. What did you think about Jim Harbaugh's thoughts?
Well, he's tackling an issue that is on a lot of people's minds about how much of a cut the players deserve based on all the money that's being made in college football via TV contracts and, the realignment proceeds that I guess, schools are getting with, switching conferences and, all that, those points are legitimate with, because again, the model seems messed up right now. There's so much turmoil and people don't really understand the world of NIL and what it means, but he didn't really present any kind of solution to the revenue sharing. He mentioned some corporations and how they share, but those corporations have employees. An employee model could introduce a whole new can of worms that, and could force, potentially the smaller programs to, drop football altogether. And then that would create its own issues because, again, football is one of 2 really revenue producing sports. And so they kind of carry the load for the rest of the athletic program with the smaller sports. So, there's so many issues, and to just say that you're in favor of revenue sharing doesn't really say much. I mean, I think, there are coaches that would be on board with that. I mean, it sounds great to recruits and players that you're supportive of them making money. I mean, who wouldn't want to hear that as a player? But again, there's no real solution there. He said, leave it up to the lawyers and other people there too.
Yeah. And also, who might not, I mean, what Jim continued to say is he's speaking for himself, right? And the reason he needed to say that multiple times is, who might not be on board with this idea is his university. Because if you are revenue sharing, and you are the largest or most well-known brand, arguably, not just in your conference, but in the nation, which way do you think that revenue is getting shared, right? Are people sharing it up with you, or are you trickling it down? And so it could mean less bottom dollar. And now it could still mean more for your players, and then you get better players, and then you win more, and it's still kumbaya and good. But it's not as simple, or I think people would have done it a long time ago, as just share revenue and give it to players. Now, just because Jim Harbaugh did not present the framework or the roadmap or the pathway to do it, in my mind, doesn't mean he's wrong. And I think he's right. And that's, again, another personal opinion. But as companies continue to grow, the people who make those companies money should do it. Now, this is not a normal, like the different, like the steel corporations and things. I'm trying to remember who he exactly equated this to. And while it's not an apples to apples comparison, it's when there's more revenue coming in, everybody should share it. It should not just get shared at the top. It's like what we're seeing in the political world right now, right?
I guess, but the other situation, he also brought up, the Nike Air movie, with Michael Jordan, and the initial contract he signed with Nike, where he wanted a cut of the proceeds from selling the shoe. Technically that's NIL. If you negotiate that into your NIL contract, technically, like if you sign an endorsement promotional deal, which is NIL, and that you're making money off your name, image, and likeness, which is what Michael Jordan's image is on the actual Air Jordan shoe, him soaring through the air on
and his name.
Yeah, so,
it's all of it.
And so I thought that was a weird, analogy to kind of point to as, because NIL does exist now, and that would
if I may. Yeah. This is bad podcasting, but if I may, I got to interject right there very quickly, because I don't think he was trying to be exactly apples to apples, but he's trying to show the corporation, or use an example, right? Like he's not showing Michigan what they need to do. He's showing the NCAA, or like the other guy, like, look, you can share and we can both benefit, right? So while it's not exactly, yes, it is NIL, I think he was just making a greater picture. That was my understanding.
I agree, but again, NIL, that's what they're endorsing certain players because they think the player can help their brand. And that's what Nike did. And it was just the details of with the revenue sharing that were being dealt with. So, that's something that you can probably do now. I don't know, again, the legalities of it, but the idea that NIL, that is essentially an NIL situation if it was just applied to college, because it's, again, it's a product, paying, for an athlete to endorse them, or, they're having the athlete, again, pitch product for them, which is what, again, they attach their brand to Michael Jordan's name, image, likeness. And so that's, I thought that was, again, a strange way of putting it, because that technically is what exists. But again, if you're going to have a revenue sharing model, as it relates to the university, that's an employment thing. And then, that's that opens a whole new can of worms as far as how that's going to work with, unionization, collective bargaining, all that stuff. And so again, we're getting way off there, but it's easy to say that you're for revenue sharing and then not provide a solution. Yeah.
Right. The Pandora's box, it seems like we're about to open it is very intimidating. I agree. However, if you're headed somewhere, I think calling it out ahead of time is, I mean, I'm not saying Jim Harbaugh like he didn't do the right thing, but he is calling to attention to an issue that has existed. And as he said, he did it last year at Big Ten Media Day and a few years before. And just very quickly, I mean, there are Board of Regents members at U of M right now who are taking this opportunity to sort of share their feelings. And one of them, like, is probably someone who Harbaugh, I mean, was not directly alluding to, but the type of person. Wow, it's going to be his second name drop in 2 podcasts, I believe. Jordan Acker, also an attorney. He has a threat he likes to espouse on the Twitter or the X, whatever you call it. And in his thread, he's thanking Jim for sharing these thoughts, for going to bat for his players. And one of the things he says is, in his view, the chancellors and presidents alongside the commissioner should be the ones making the decision, because otherwise it's going to end up in the hands of federal judges who don't have the same subject matter expertise, right? And so it's like, this decision is going to get made by someone. We want to be the ones making it, or let's let us have a say in it before we hand it over to the courts.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes sense. And the one thing I will say about, Jim Harbaugh has been consistent about this. I mean, raising, players' rights issues, whether it was the one-time free transfer, this subject, so it makes sense. But, again, it's hard to kind of come out there and say, like, this needs to be done without providing any kind of real, again, pathway towards getting to that goal. And so, I mean, it was, again, I think it was his way in some ways of trying to take everyone's eye off the ball a little bit. Also, obviously paint the NCAA as not the great guy, whereas, they're under NCAA investigation still. And so, why are you picking on the good guy, who's trying to find a solution for like this much bigger matter that is probably more relevant to a lot more people than, just this little minor investigation as it relates to one school. But like, it's again, he's dealing with the, the NCAA investigation at the same time, and is also feeling, the repercussions of that NCAA investigation at this time, when he's also making a thing against, this matter needs to be, kind of, you need to focus on this matter, not this matter kind of situation.
I do think, I don't think the timing of his statement was a coincidence, right? And I asked him that. I was like, so why now is this the time to really make this point? And he had a good point. He's like, I've said this. He's like, I've been saying this for years, but he has not taken notes, and at the beginning of a press conference, taken 6 uninterrupted minutes to speak. Now, 6 minutes, like when you to someone who's like, 6 minutes, that's not that long time. You don't know how long 6 uninterrupted minutes of speaking is with 50 people all staring at you waiting to ask questions, right? Like, you can ask him a question and get an answer for 6 seconds. So for it to be 6 minutes, like, I think there was some element, he'll never admit it, there was some element of making sure he looked like the sort of like a moral authority, like he is always looking out for the players, for the best interest of everyone. And look at what the big, like, to your point, I agree fully. Like, look at what the big mean NCAA is doing. And look, I'm not just saying my team should get it. I'm not just saying my program or my school should get it. I'm saying everyone should get it, right? It's so easy to look like, oh yeah, like, absolutely. Like, and he's a huge face, right? So it can't be taken away. It's not nothing for him to say this, right? Like, his name is on this statement forever. However, the timing doesn't seem to be a coincidence to me. But that can be fine, because what he can be saying can still be true.
Right, and we'll never know the full reasons for why he came out there for doing it. But like, it is strange that at the same time that again, the main topic that everybody was interested in hearing from him about when the press conference began was the suspension. And, he only had a statement, I'm not going to get bitter, but better, right when that suspension was announced, as self-imposed. And so this was his first time to really talk about that and his feelings. And he described it as like getting a club to the kneecap, baseball bat to the kneecap versus a slap on the wrist. And so clearly he doesn't love the idea of being suspended. And I think it's, something that really probably sticks in his craw. And he doesn't want to be seen as, a coach who had to be suspended at any point. I mean, who does? And then you're also during a season when you might actually have a shot at a national championship, I think is, because again, it creates an awkward aside. We've mentioned this like every time we've talked, that's a possibility of like, well, other fan bases are going to use that against Michigan and as a way to criticize them.
And you did, and we all wanted to talk about the suspension, right? And we understand that he's not going to be able to get into the specifics of it and how it's all shaken out. But what he can say is like what he did today, what he did on the revenue sharing. He's like, look, this isn't Michigan's stance. This is my opinion. He's perfectly allowed to give his opinion on anything, right? I mean, it would be jeopardizing himself, but he could fully say like, yeah, I'm really, really bummed. And he did in some sort of ways, but I think you did an awesome job of asking like, how were you informed, right? Like, was this a collaborative process? Did you accept it? Because how you said it is exactly right. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is still not accepting these level one accusations. He is saying that he's saying that anything saying he misled the NCAA is not true. However, Michigan has self-imposed a 3-game suspension on him. You don't get a 3-game suspension for the level 2 violations, meaning they are giving some credence to the fact that this is in the ether. And I think you did a phenomenal job asking, well, I mean, how do you feel about that? Right. And he really sidestepped it, but yeah. That's the real thing here. In my mind, that's the real story. Like the disconnect between, but it's also because they have, as we talked last time, they probably have differing agendas, Michigan and Jim Harbaugh.
Well, so yeah, someone close to Harbaugh told me that, Harbaugh doesn't think he really did anything wrong. And so he's not really happy about the suspension. And so again, it creates an awkward dynamic with him and Ward. I mean, don't forget Ward Manuel gave him a pay cut after the 2020 season. Now there's a suspension too. And then you've had all the drama in the offseason with the NFL stuff. That relationship is, keeps, there's weird stuff that keeps influencing that relationship and affecting it. And it's got to be very, very, very strange at this point. Again, that person told me that I think, him and Ward don't always agree on things, but their relationship's better than it may be portrayed. But at the same token, I mean, again, the stuff is cumulative and it does wear on probably both of them to the point that, again, what is it going to mean come January of next year when, again, we hit the NFL, coaching cycle and, whatever the outcome of this season and how it affects everything is kind of subject to chance. And I don't think that this situation helps things as far as, keeping it, necessarily Harbaugh happy, as it relates to, a future at Michigan.
I don't think it does, but as he says, he reassesses at the end of every year. Yep. No man knows what the future can hold. Yeah. And that's how we end in this merry-go-round, right? Like up and down and round she goes, 365. So at least we heard something from him. Not, I can't say it. Because I at least appreciated him saying that while he didn't use the word frustrated, I mean, calling it uncharted water. I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, all the talk about I haven't missed 3 games since I broke my arm against Michigan State in '84. I mean, he's a football. For whatever Jim Harbaugh is, he's a football guy. And he is not happy that he isn't going to be around. And for what it's worth, I think one of my good buddies' son is on Jim Harbaugh's son's football team. So I'm gonna try to get a schedule. See where Jack Harbaugh's game is at. See if we can find where he'll be Saturday.
That'll be interesting.
Would you go? Well, no. Are you gonna be in East Lansing on Friday, and then you'll be with me on Saturday?
Yeah,
right?
That's the plan. Yes, for sure.
I don't know if we'll have Sean with us too. we should send someone on Jack Harbaugh football watch. That could be interesting. I mean, but actually, if you think about what the numbers that would do, I know we're not here for the number, but like, I mean, just the interest it would generate. People would love to know what Jim Harbaugh actually did on Saturday. But I know that's just a pipe dream for me. All right, we're going to wrap that here. And then when we come back, we're bringing in Andrew Burkle, our producer of the show, one of our sports editors, and another very good football mind, who I know will probably lap me in these predictions. It's not saying much, but here we go. That's coming up next. Welcome back to Hail Yes. It is time for the picks. But before we do that, we need an official introduction to Andrew Burkle, our sports editor, our producer of Hail Yes, and really the man who makes all the things operate and come together in the sports scene, in the sports department, behind the scenes, I should say. He's also my good buddy. He helped me get hired here a year and a half ago. I hope I helped return the favor. Whether I did or not, he's here. So, Andrew, is that all accurate?
I think, well, you didn't mess it up. I'll say that. You definitely didn't mess it up. But yeah, so Tony, I was running our website at a TV station we both worked at together. Kirkland, who's our sports editor, called me, and then we returned the favor. So long story short, Tony and I are working together for the second time, and it's been just as good so far as it was the last time. So excited to be part of this podcast and schooling you guys in some picks every week.
You will. And it's funny, very quickly. He was my recommendation when I was getting hired to the Free Press, because technically he was a web editor, but then I had got to the Free Press. He's like, hey, do you think you could recommend me to your boss? I was like, I think that's the least I could do. So it goes around. Yep. His name's Andrew, but I call him Andy. I almost did it on the pod. Andrew, take it away.
So guys, let's get into the week one matchups here. So not as loaded as it typically has been in the last few years. I think some of it has to do with the college football playoff, only 4 teams. You really can't mess up early on. So a couple more cupcakes than we're used to seeing, but there are still some good games out there. We'll start with some Big Ten action. Ohio State versus Indiana. OSU has a lot of these early season games against Big Ten, that week one game against the Big Ten opponent, it seems like. But Rainer, let's start with you. Who are you taking? Minus 29.5, Ohio State, almost favored by 30 points against a Big Ten opponent. But who are you taking in this one?
To take in Indiana, I just think, with OSU having to break in a new quarterback, they got to iron out some kinks. And I just think, Tom Allen will be able to figure out something, to kind of slow them down a little bit. Not to the point that obviously they beat them, but, at least not to be able to kind of keep within striking distance, or at least, the spread of Ohio State. So I don't see Ohio State covering, I guess, in that sense.
Tony, you got a pick for us?
I do. I'm going the opposite way. There's a few rules I have, and it's not like the dope bet against Alabama, but it's close to it. And Ohio State, I guess I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it feels like early in the season. I mean, unless it's like those Virginia Tech games, like obvious games where they fall, or Oregon, they dropped a couple big non-conference games. They just hammer teams early on. And that's because the talent deficit is so great that when other teams, in my opinion, when other teams are sort of figuring out those kinks, Ohio State can do it, but they're figuring out kinks with 5 stars while Indiana's doing it with 3 stars. And I mean, right. And the Buckeyes, I mean, their backfield is loaded. Just the sense I got down in Indianapolis, I mean, they are pissed off. It's been more than a decade since they've been looked at like this, perceived like this, talked about like this. I mean, I think Ohio State wins by 42, 45. I mean, I think they lay a smackdown on Indiana in what sets the tone for Tom Allen's final season in Bloomington.
All right, so I'll split the difference here. I'm going to land on Ohio State as well. So one rule that I typically follow in football picks is the NFL, the whole system is designed to keep teams close, right? They're all about roughly equal teams. The whole system is designed to make them for parity. College football largely is the opposite. As Tony mentioned, Ohio State's going to be trying to figure it out, but they're figuring it out with 5-star guys versus Indiana. There's no preseason. Indiana doesn't have any more of a head start than Ohio State. Also, the quarterback battle between Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, that makes me want to actually pick Ohio State more because these guys are both fighting for their jobs. So if McCord goes out there and lays an egg in the first half, say he's the starter in the first half, Brown gets the second half or vice versa. Like, these guys are fighting for their job, and Indiana's enough of an opponent. They're not, for example, East Carolina or someone else like that. They're a Big Ten football team. They can't mess around. So I think Ohio State takes care of business and easily covers that 29.5. So,
I mean, we saw the importance last year in Michigan's opener. I mean, it felt pretty. Cade McNamara had a bad first half, and JJ came in and looked better, and it was pretty quick. We were like, ooh, like that looked notable, right? And so, to your point, I mean, these are very, very significant snaps for them. And whoever wins the job, while it's not going to be a proven quarterback like a CJ Stroud walking in the door, they're throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. They're throwing to Emeka Egbuka. They have a loaded backfield, right? Stover on tight end. I mean, they have talent all over the field. So whoever it is.
Yeah, no. I was just saying, you're equating Indiana to Colorado State. That's pretty harsh.
It was kind of funny. You mentioned the JJ McCarthy and McNamara thing. It's almost like that situation has become like a horror story for starting quarterbacks across the country. It's like, well, why did Peyton Thorne leave Michigan State? Oh, he didn't want to have a Cade McNamara situation. Oh, why is Kyle McCord need to play well against in the first? Hey, you don't want to have a Cade McNamara situation. It's funny how quickly that became like a reality that even if you're starting that first game, it might be a fake starting job. So it's funny how that's quickly kind of transcended across college football here. So second game, we're not so much as well picking this game because of the two teams involved, more so because of one of the teams involved and one of the new coaches, Deion Sanders taking over Colorado, playing TCU in game one. A fun showdown. TCU favored by 21.5. Obviously made it the championship game last year, as Michigan fans know all too well. What are you guys seeing? Tony, we'll start with you on this one. Who you picking, TCU or Colorado?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everybody in the public, like Joe Public, is probably going to be on Colorado because of Deion and just being the known name. However, TCU lost a ton from last year, right? Like this is not the same TCU team. And now they were not projected to go to a natty. I think they were projected to finish in like the middle of the Big 12. But it's really hard to lose a Max Duggan, to lose a Quentin Johnson, to lose a Hodge Tomlinson on defense. I can't remember their linebacker or Reiner, the guy we met, that computer, Johnny Hodges, I think his name was, at linebacker. Right. I mean, I was so impressed with that guy. He was so awesome. But TCU just does not have the same depth. Now, could they still win? Of course. I mean, because Deion brought his own luggage to Colorado and is Louis, but it's not there yet. Like, yeah, that's what he's bringing, and he got rid of all the J.C. Penney and all the BS bags that they have laying around in Colorado. So there might not be a ton of talent there right now, but I'm still going to go with them because I think TCU is replacing too much, and 21 is a lot of points, and Deion is still a good coach.
Yeah, I disagree just because, again, Colorado just basically blew up their entire roster, and they're, again, having a coach that's moving from the FCS level to the FBS going against a guy who just led his team to a college football playoff. And Sonny Dykes is a good coach and, can really scheme up things himself. I mean, he's got a good offensive mind, and now they lost Garrett Riley, as the OC. So it'll be interesting to see what they do from an offensive standpoint. But I just think, given the fact that Colorado just had so much change across the roster and there's just a huge unknown, I just think, and again, TCU, is, coming back with I guess a decent roster. I don't know if anything close to what they had last year, but, I give Sonny Dykes the benefit of the doubt. And I just am a little bit circumspect on the whole changing your entire program basically in one off season and how that's going to play out week one. So I'm going with TCU.
All right. So Andrew's going to have to break it again.
I know. Here we go again. I like how this is playing out. So I agree with you, Rainer. I don't think Colorado is going to have that instant turnaround where it's like, oh, all of a sudden they're 10-2. However, sometimes I just like to think about sitting on the couch on Saturday and what I can see happening. And I can just see it now. TCU starts slow. They have a whole new team. You're sitting there, you're watching. The announcers are getting all excited, like, oh my God, look how quickly Deion Sanders turned this thing around. And I don't think they're going to win. I think TCU wins, but I bet you Colorado scares them a little bit. So I'm going to take the 21.5, and I'm going to split the difference again side with Tony on this one.
2 for 2.
2 for 2.
Really, what that means is 0-2, but
yeah, exactly. So I talked smack about beating you in the picks, and then we picked the same team for the first 2 picks. So, anyways, all right, final pick here. We got LSU and Florida State, game of the week, a top 10 showdown, no doubt. This game's being played on Sunday, so almost like an NFL type layout here. So we have LSU favored by 2.5. The game is being played on a neutral site in Orlando. Rainer, who do you got?
I got LSU for this one. I just think, with Jaden Daniels, and then you have a really strong defense. A lot of people are really bullish on LSU. From people I talk to are kind of very familiar with the SEC. So they think that they're, really a dark horse national title contender. Now, if I'm Michigan, I'd probably want LSU to win this game, because if Florida State wins it, they have a pretty decent pass in a much easier ACC, whereas LSU still has to contend with the SEC West. So if you're a Michigan fan, I think you'd rather have LSU win this game than you would FSU. But anyway, I'm picking LSU to win. So.
Yes, because you're a Michigan fan, like we mentioned earlier. I'm kidding. No, so I guess we're just gonna disagree on everything today, Rainer. I'm going to go with Florida State, and no, it is not because my girlfriend graduated from Florida State or her father graduated from Florida State, and I need to stay in his good graces. It's because I think it's a really tough game, and it could go either way. I like the points. I think Florida State could actually even win this straight up. So if you're going to take him plus 2.5, maybe sprinkle a little juice on the money line. Jared Verse, a defensive end, he was on my All-American preseason team. I think he could be a top 15, potentially top 10 pick this year. They just added Keon Coleman from Michigan State, who might have been one of the top 3 receivers in the Big Ten had he stayed this year. Johnny Wilson is a huge target on the outside. He's also another first potential NFL receiver. I mean, they got legit dudes, right? Mike Norvell actually has this thing going. And to your point, Rainer, they got 2 games. I'm kind of like Michigan, but Michigan's games are in November, right? It's Penn State and Ohio State. Florida State, it's front loaded, baby. We got LSU to kick it off. Then you got to go to Clemson on September 30th, 23rd, 30th, one of those. And so by the end of this month, Florida State will know if they're going to go to the college football playoff or how good their chance is. Chop on. What do they say? Chop on? Something about chop? Go Noles? I don't know. So go Noles.
Well, you seem like the Florida State expert here. You got their schedule memorized and everything over there. So I think we'll refer to you on their.
Well, chance. I told you I'm being indoctrinated by people. I think my girlfriend's father was there when Dion was there in the 90s. So I mean we're talking like Florida State heavy, and I voted for the AP team. I can do the LSU thing. Jaden Daniels I think is a great Heisman bet. If you're not going to go Caleb Williams, I think I don't know his juice. I don't know what the odds are, but I think back when he was at Arizona State, very good. Harold Perkins, for my money, the best linebacker in America for LSU, and he gets to line up behind, I can't remember, I think it's Jaron Smith or something. It's got 2 names, Mason Smith something. He got injured last year, that defensive tackle for LSU. And now, but he is a behemoth, like a really, really large man, and they got big depth on the inside. So there's your LSU FSU breakdown.
It's really about your family, as Brian Kelly.
Family.
That's why you picked them. But Brian Kelly's also, again, he's got that thing going too. Him and Mike Novell have done a good job. But anyway, that's just an aside. On to you, Andrew.
The SEC does not mess around in these preseason showdowns. They have a ridiculous record in the cross conference matchups for a reason. So when in doubt, I'm going to roll with the SEC in this one. And like you said, Tony, LSU, they have Jaden Daniels. They have Brian Kelly got this thing rolling in year 2. And then they just always have dudes. So with LSU, it comes down a lot of times to what's the quarterback situation. And is it good enough to allow the ridiculous athletes they have on the D-line and linebacker and receiver all over the field to succeed? And I think this is a legit team from everything you hear about LSU. This is one of their good ones. And now, will they survive a conference that has the Georgia and Alabama. I know Georgia's in the opposite division, but theoretically, if they're going to make it to the playoff, they're going to have to play them in the SEC championship. That means they only have one loss in the regular season available. So I don't know if they make the playoff just because of how tough the SEC is, but I think they knock off Florida State in this one.
Yeah, no doubt. That's the game I'm looking forward to the most this weekend. And I think that's the game America's looking forward to the most this weekend. However, the game all of you listening to this are most looking forward to, I'm sure, is Michigan versus East Carolina. And the next time you hear us, that's what we will be breaking down. So just very quickly, this is going to be, the plan is this is the only pod this week. Normally, we will be doing 2 a week in advance. On Sunday, we will record for a Monday morning, breaking down the game that just happened. And then on Wednesday, we will record for Thursday to preview the upcoming game. And of course, get into all the other news and notes that happen in between. But this will be the only episode for this week. Next time you hear us, it will drop next Monday before Jim Harbaugh or whoever's coaching previews UNLV. And then we will be back on Thursday to talk about that game. So that's how it goes. That's the schedule. And got to give some thanks. So we cannot do this and cannot make this happen without Editor-in-Chief Nicole Avery-Nichols. She guides us as we continue to follow our North Star. Executive Editor Anjanette Delgado, Sports Editor Kirkland Crawford, Audio Engineer Robin Chan, of course, who you just heard, Producer and Editor Andrew Burkle, and of course, all of you, the listeners. We've loved getting this going so far. So please continue to rate, review, subscribe. It's so annoying you hear that on podcasts, but it actually helps. It legitimately makes a difference. So take 5 seconds to do it. And like I said, send me a picture when you do it. And then eventually when we get enough, I will have to determine what that is. I'll send out some reward to someone random. There will be more specifics on that to come shortly. I know that was great podcasting. That was well done. Rainer, fantastic. Andrew, good work as always. That's going to do it on this episode of Hail Yes. We'll see you next week.